Chapter 1, 26th day of March, 1678. Halfway home, the putrid smell of the cages in the enchanted castle of Newgate still stifled my nose. Though the street odours were vile, their comparable sweetness cleared the gagging substance that stuck in my airways. His Majesty's jail overflowed with those falsely accused of plotting against the king. How those poor wretches lived on such solid foulness day after day, I could not tell, but could only surmise the body, being a wondrous thing, must alter itself to survive when the spirit gives it strength to do so. At the least, being free to leave, I was not forced to test this idea for myself. Unlike in the countryside, where the winter season tests a person most fully, I pondered whether the worst season in the city is the summer, when a lavender-soaked handkerchief is small protection against swarms of flies circling unavoidable shoe-deep waste, unavoidable only if you are not well enough placed to use a coach or hackney carriage. Moreover, the best season in London is the frozen winter, when ice locks tight all noxious odours beneath the feet and casts the Thames in such ice that it becomes the place of the winter fair. That time was past, and now regular rain had washed much dirt into the river. Despite the vernal purging, there still remained a single stream of sucking mud in the middle channel of the street that, in my distraction, I stepped deep into. The putrid dregs of city life drenched my shoe and spilled over the top of it. The awful day might have ended there, with my thinking that the day had shown me its worst, had it not been for the sky squeezing out a sudden shower. But I would yet be downtrodden by Dame Nature, for the rain was a blessing to me. I raised my face and thanked God for the cool, clear water that washed over me and cleansed me, lifted my skirts out of the gutter to lessen the spattering and splashing of the muck, and continued walking, trying to wash my filthy foot as much as I could in any fresh puddle before I reached home. Even as it purged the stench from my nostrils and clothes, the rain could not reach inside and expel every persistent, sordid memory of the day from my mind. I blinked equally persistent raindrops from my lashes as I remembered the morning's events. Madame Cellier, aidez-moi, s'il vous plaît. Marie Desameaux, the young Huguenot midwife that lived near me, pleaded as we left Newgate. Though my French was much improved, she spoke fast in her mother tongue, and I did not comprehend all she then said. Parlez-vous lentement, Marie? Je ne peux pas vous comprendre, I said. Speak slowly, Marie. I cannot understand you. The French my husband had taught me was little enough to comprehend his people. Using a combination of gestures and the occasional English word, she asked that I called on the wife of a local carpenter, Mrs. Potter, whom she feared did not receive proper care as she should. I did not question that the woman was Catholic, else I would not even be asked to visit with her. Nor would a Protestant midwife do the task of a Catholic sister. Each tended her own. That strict law caused the death of many a poor mother and infant, but was nevertheless the law we abided by. Religion had no bearing on success in the art, and indeed some of our kind on both sides had no training at all, and dealt us badly. Marie communicated her fear that the one tending the carpenter's wife was such a one. She gestured until I understood that this was a wicked, wicked woman, and I should not tarry, so I did not. My arrival at the house was greeted by screams that rent the air with so much urgency that I deemed the woman already in delivery and the baby wrongly placed. The cries and howls were such that my heart stopped, for no person hearing that unparalleled noise expelled from living flesh could believe life could remain long in a body. My knock was unanswered, and fearing the woman to be birthing alone and in danger, I went in. Manners and civilities be damned. I hurried through the house, following my ears to the source, though at times the noise perplexed me by seeming to come from all directions. I barely noticed the man kneeling beside the fireplace praying. He stoked the customary fire to keep evil spirits from taking the innocent newborn soul. Kneeling behind him, a boy of 6 or 7 covered his ears with his hands and cried. No child should hear such agonies in his mother. I did not waste time asking if I might enter. The woman's cries were invitation enough. Neither stood to stop me as I continued to the back chamber. I expected to find the woman with gossips, kinswomen or neighbours, but found a lone midwife performing heinous ritual banned from the craft for a matter of centuries, if ever they were acceptable. Her red cloak lay over a nearby chair, but she may as well have worn it for all the red that covered her. Every part of her was stained with the blood of the woman, or maybe the unborn child. It could have been either. In her hand she wielded as a sword an instrument the likes I did never wish to see in the hands of such a one, or any other. She poked the long stick, unsmoothed by any carpenter, curved at the end like a shepherd's hook, in and out of the woman's womb to hook out the baby, missed and tried again, oblivious to the pain she caused the mother. The pool of blood laid testimony to how ineffectual her method. She murdered the woman with her ignorance. "Desist, woman! What helleth deed is this that you do?" I shouted, surprising her into stopping her abhorrent act. "Unhand that devil's stick." "Stay out of my business, Mrs. Cellier. This is my task." Her meaning was clear. She would take payment for it, not me, with nary a thought for mother nor unborn child. How she knew my name I did not give a thought to. "I cannot allow it. You murder the woman and her child." I grabbed the stick as she made to start again. She slapped me with her bloodied hand, but I held fast and pulled. Then I slapped her back. She put her hand to her cheek and blooded it. She let go of the stick. "Do not dare teach me my job, French leech. Some of us must eke a living from the poor, and some of us must take any job, even a doomed job as this. Go away and drink from the gold cup you keep at the palace." "Remember your oath, woman, rich and poor alike. And if this woman is doomed, 'tis all your doing." I spat on the floor. "Oath be damned," she spat towards me rather than the floor. "I took none. When they denied us license, they took our living. The stubborn baby must come forth now. I have another laying in today." "Then let me have this one," I said. "You cannot be in 2 places in one time." "No, this one is mine. 'Tis I that tended her these last months." "You deserve no payment for your foul work here. Leave now, or I shall call a magistrate and have you indicted for assault." I tried to snatch the stick back from her hand, but she held fast and pulled back. "What? But you cannot be serious. I have done the most work on this." "Still your busy hand, woman. Your work here is that of the devil, and you cannot take pride in it. If that woman loses more blood, she will surely die. If I could not save this one's life, I might as well at least prevent further torture." "Her baby refuses to come forth and is stuck fast as Excalibur in the stone." The woman stopped her jabbing, freed the bloody stick from my hand and pointed it at me. I grabbed it again. "Stuck? Has the baby released its waters then? It was my understanding she was to lay in another month." "'Tis her time, I tell you. She tried to raise the foul hook once more, but I held tight." "Well, if it is her time, then leave me to tend her, for you are not fit to be at her side." Something in my voice must have warned her of my intention. She looked at me warily. "I will not leave until I have taken payment." Without a thought, I opened my purse and gave her some coins. "Take those and be gone. I meant no reward for this devil, but wished her leave so I might attend to the poor tortured creature atop the bed. The moment she had silver in her bloodied palms, the evil incarnate dropped the coins in her pocket, threw down the stick, and wiped her hands on her filthy apron. "You may clean your hands with my grease," I said, thinking of the next woman she would attend. She paid me no mind, but took her red cloak from the chair, donned it, and then left, saying no more. I intended to relate the story of this woman to all that would listen, that none other would give her custom. Her future prey would be only the innocent and ignorant my word did not reach. Looking to the bed, I felt shame to wear the same red cloth. Mrs. Potter had stopped screaming and lay bleeding and still. Her silence was ominous. I doubted if there was any single thing I could do for her or the baby. I took the pot of goose grease from my bag and cleaned my hands while shouting to the husband to boil some water as a matter of urgency. Soon after, Mr. Potter came in, wary as a man found guilty of treason awaiting sentence, and looked to the bed. "Does my wife live?" Never have I heard such noise in childbirth. I thought of the boy, covering his ears, rocking back and forth with wet cheeks. He might be motherless tonight and the man a widower. She is directly wounded. "Has that creature murdered her?" he asked, gesturing towards the door. Betraying my kind, I nodded, but comforting words did not come. Comforting words hid from me. "Well, the baby, is it?" He did not have to finish. I shrugged. There was no way of knowing what damage that monster did until I examined the poor woman. Behind the water... "Bring the water as soon as it is ready," I said, as I returned to the bedside. I did not wish the man to see what I was about to do to his poor wife. It did not take long to confirm Mrs. Potter's heart no longer beat, and her breath did not wet the looking-glass. I should look to the unborn child. With no reason now to think of the mother, still bleeding over the bed, I reached my hand deep inside and felt the baby's soft warmth, and a movement so small I might have missed it had I not stayed steady. I could not feel the head, it was breech. Perhaps that saved it. If it would survive the inflictions of that stick, it must be taken from the body now. When a woman had no life left in her, the child would not choose to come out of the customary way. I must cut her open and take it out. I considered my tools in the open bag. Amid small glass lotions, bottles, and articles for a poultice were a knife, forceps, and a needle and cloth, as well as some alcohol. I took the knife, honed sharp for such times as this. Had the woman been alive, I would have set it in the fire to cleanse, but such a time-consuming task was needless now. I opened the poor woman's mouth so that the child might receive breath, rolled her onto her left side, and cut smart and neatly into her belly. I withdrew the infant. It no longer moved. Was it too late? I wiped the remains of the sack from the face and stuck my finger into the tiny black mouth to check for the blockage, and then took the tender little ankles in one hand and hung the small body upside down and slapped it hard to clear its lungs. I did not know if it was still warm from its mother or from its own self. There was damage to its legs from the woman's stick, but it seemed otherwise whole. Still, it did not move. Had that devil given Mrs. Potter a potion that reached into the baby and stopped it breathing? She knew less than cared what she did, so it was possible. The door opened, but I was too busy with the baby to throw a sheet over the sliced belly and save the husband's eyes. He had the boiled water, but quickly saw his time was wasted. Times like this were too frequent and disgraced me. I grieve for you, Mr. Potter, for no woman should ever bear such treatment, and no man should ever suffer his wife to do so, I said. My voice did not sound as if it came from myself. Holding the pail of steaming water, he looked at the open, staring eyes of his wife on the bed and the still form of the baby hanging from my hand. It was as if his very soul was taken from him. He cried then. He cried like an animal in pain. "Why, Lord? Why do you take my wife and child without me?" Wide-eyed, he fixed on the discarded mortal remains of the woman so recently his life companion. "Has the dark of night come to claim my day? Wake me from this, my worst nightmare, or take me, Lord. Take me to her." In horror, I watched as the man dropped to his knees, spilling scalding water on him, and then plunge his hand into the deep water and scream, "Are bad dreams come to life? Take my pain that I know I dream." I fast placed the dead body on the bed beside its mother and rushed to aid the living. When I kicked over the pail, some spilled onto my leg. As if the action brought reality to the man, he collapsed over, his knees bent double, his head onto the floor, and howled. The man's grief was too great and could not be stayed by me, so I returned to the still form of the baby. If I did not try one more time, that woman would have the lives of two, and that I would not allow. The man had lost his wife and the boy his mother. I would not see them lose the baby without every effort to save it. The infant was turned black. I once saw a midwife bringing a child back to life by the slapping of it from the bottom of the spine to the top. So I held firm its greasy feet and slapped it hard in the way I had seen, gripping hard to stop the slippery skin sliding through my fingers. There was no movement from this baby, but the man looked up, his jaw open, a frown upon his brow. The question froze ere it was full-formed. "What?" "I must try, see?" I told him, not wanting to waste breath talking. He shook his head and winced each time I hopelessly slapped its tiny back again and again. Nothing. Letting go of hope, the man returned his head to the floor and continued weeping. I should have stopped, but a deep part of me had to purge the shame of what that midwife had done, and another part of me imagined the midwife there before me, so I was possessed by an urge to hit her until she could hurt no other. But she was gone, and my actions had no benefit. Neither did my anger abate. I slapped the baby hard on the back one last time. Perhaps it was the strength of the strike that forced the small ball of black liquid from its mouth. But no other thing happened, so I carried the body towards the bed to lay it down, knowing I had now done every earthly thing I knew of. As I placed the body down, I near dropped it in surprise when it whistled like wind in the trees, but the man's crying made me uncertain of what I heard. "Hush," I said to the mother, more severely than I meant. "Hush!" When he realised my urgency, thick silence filled the room, pushed back the walls and the windows, so all I could hear were echoes of the woman's screams. I let go of my breath. False hope. Even the bodies of newborns sometimes passed through final throes and gurgled and rattled when death came for them. As the life had gone from the infant, so it went from me. My shoulders slumped. I lay the little body next to its mother, made the sign of the cross and murmured the Paternoster, so that the Lord would receive these innocents into his kingdom. When the husband saw I prayed, he bowed his own head, but then resumed his wailing the moment I finished. What more could I do but clean the room? The Almighty God knew Mr. Potter was unable. Perhaps he was the only one to know why this little one was taken before it had lived any time, but the devil it was that used such an evil woman as the instrument of her death. This woman called into question my life's work and pride, all I had ever done or wanted to do. In this moment, the craft my mother had passed on to me, as I had passed it on to my eldest daughter, burned me with guilt and the wish to divest divest myself of any tie to it. Wearing the red cloak once more could only lay my own claim to that she-devil's actions. I looked at my cloak lying where I did not remember dropping it, and imagined throwing it, along with my prized bags of lotions, medicines and ointments, into the deep Thames there when I left there. Perhaps I stood there a long time, perhaps no time at all. The man cried still, but perhaps sensing my stillness, looked up, his face wet and so red that he might have plunged it in the boiling water as he had his hand. Suddenly the bed made a squealing, hissing sound like a fresh-cut log thrown in the fire. In the silence that followed, I searched for the cause of that noise. Then, when I thought I had imagined it, a yell tore through the air, so loud it caused me to start. The baby! A miracle had brought the baby back. My prayer was answered. He was alive. The little soul returned to us. For a moment I could do nothing but take in the sight of the baby, unable to credit it. The man, equally incredulous, came to his feet and moved to the other side of the bed, and for a while we both simply stared down at the infant. The baby moved and waved his hands weakly in the air. I shook my head and forced myself into action. With the oath I had taken before it was forbidden came permission for a midwife to baptize where necessary. This baby lived and cried, but if only our father knew why he was taken before, then only he knew if he might take him from us once more. Without further ado, I cleaned every orifice and swaddled the baby, then asked the man for the gown he should be baptized in. Likely the one either the father or the mother had been baptized in too. He found it and brought it to me. I fast made a cross over the water in a bowl and thanked God for the blessing of this child's return. Then I dipped my fingers in the still water, spoke the necessary words, and administered the sacrament. That done, I took the baby up and once more swaddled him and offered him to the father. The man no longer bawled, but took a step back from the infant, as if it had the devil in it. I had seen it before. Some fathers might not take to a child when the wife had lost her life for it. I ignored Mr. Potter's red hand, which I would deal with shortly, and pressed the infant into his arms, shoving at the man's chest when he did not at first take him. The balance tipped from reluctance to acceptance, and he folded his arms around the bundle with surprising tenderness, new tears falling gently, quietly, on the baby's tiny face. Later, once I had tended the man's burnt hands with an ointment of plantain, comfrey and thyme, and dressed them with bandages, I took time to sew the woman's belly that he would no longer have to see the insides, then cleaned up the day's mess as best as I could, scrubbing blood from the floor and wall, and placed fresh sheets beneath Mrs. Potter. Wouldst that I had another pair of hands to help me. Finally, I laid out the corpse and cleaned her from head to toe, and dressed her in fresh clothes the best I could without help, ready for her family and friends to pay their last respects. It would normally be the job of the womenfolk of the family. I finished and wiped stray hair from my eyes with the back of my forearm. Before leaving, I collected my paraphernalia together and gave Mr. Potter a bottle of burn lotion and instructed him in the use of it. He still held the baby, and the boy child by the fireplace peeked out from behind him. I am indebted to you for my child's life, Mrs. I beg your pardon, madam. I failed to ask your name. For the first time since I came here, I looked fully at the man. I could not recall such a plain face. There was nothing remarkable about it at all. His nose was small and straight, his mouth was not too large nor too small, his eyes were a good distance apart and of a common colour. He did not wear a periwig, for he was not in society, though it was likely he frequently wore one, for his brown hair was shorn tight to his head. Despite having no mark of distinction, his face was of a good man, and I warmed to him. "The name is Mrs. Cellier, Mr. Potter. Elizabeth Cellier." "My gratitude will always be at your side, Mrs. Cellier," he said. My heart heavy and body worn, I would have done more, but no words of comfort for his wife came to mind, so I merely nodded. It was usual at this point to ask for payment, but I did not have that sort of uncaring heart. I still intended to find a neighbour to stay with him, and of course a wet nurse for the infant. Mr. Potter informed me that the unusual lack of gossips at Mrs. Potter's bedside was because the so-called midwife had sent them away, a most peculiar thing to do. If I had to scour the whole of the city, I would find that woman and hold her accountable. "Thank you, Mrs. Cellier," said Mr. Potter. "That woman has taken my wife, but you have given me back my son." "Only God can give life back, Mr. Potter," I said. "He must have use here on earth for this child." That was ere noon, and now, coming from Newgate, the second time this day, I turned right from the Old Bailey Lane into Ludgate Hill towards home, and wished the rain might purge the image of that devil's minion in the red cloak and the dreadful carnage she left behind. Women of that nature should not dare to call themselves midwives, but murderers. Dwelling deep on such horror, at first I did not hear the footsteps following in mine, but as I became aware of them, I naturally quickened. I had safely walked the streets at all times of day and night for so many years, my midwife cloak protecting me. I had become accustomed to doing so unchallenged. As well, I maintained a respect for the characters that travelled them. Foolishly, I did not even yet imagine the footsteps had any relevance for myself, until suddenly my cloak was grabbed so that I nearly lost my balance and fell. "You, whore of the Frenchman, plague of the city, what say you on the plot against the king? Talk, witch, what know you?" I spun full round at the growl, to find a hostile woman holding my cloak. Beyond her stood an equally unfriendly man and 3 children, any mask of civility removed, so that even the faces of the children held the raw purpose of a pack of hunters cornering their prey. "Tell me why I should know the answer to your question," I asked boldly, pulling myself upright and grabbing back my cloak. "Do you deny you befriend papist plotters?" "I do no such thing. I know of no plotters." Drops of rain dripped from the hem of my hood as I raised my head and tried to walk past. "But I know you. You are thick as thieves with the papist priests and traitors to the king. I doubt not that you hide wicked popish charms, amulets, and idols in your basket under the sham of arms, and carry treacherous notes between the villains of Newgate and their plotting accomplices in the city." As the scowling woman said this, she stepped forward, as did the others of the family. The woman grabbed my wrist. "Unhand me," I said, putting all my authority I had ever learned into my voice, and pulled free from her hard grip, as an action made possible only by the greasing of the rein. The woman barely reacted. She stayed too close to me, and again growled in my face like a dog. Such hatred and suspicion was common in every Protestant that feared a Catholic should sit on the throne and bring the abomination of southern countries to our own 3 kingdoms. As of late, any not of this country or of the Presbyterian faith were condemned on the street without trial, and many an innocent man and woman was beaten for their religion or origin. Being both Catholic and married to a foreigner, I was doubly condemned. This one seemed to know me, but I did not remember her. I doubted reasonable voice would sway her, but nevertheless I spoke out. "I have wronged no man, and intend none to any." She ignored my protest, so convinced was she that I was guilty of foul play. Without further warning, The woman struck me with some hard thing she had in her hand I had not seen. My head spun, and bile filled my mouth. The woman did not strike once, but followed it by another and another before I had chance to recover. I shielded my face from her brutal fists, but when her husband and children joined her, hitting and kicking me anywhere they could, I had no defence. "You bloody Popish toad, take your vile, venomous husband back to that putrid bog you come from," I heard the man say, muffled by my arms wrapped around my ears to shield my head. "I am of this kingdom," I shouted without hope of my words would find a mark. "This is my land." My words were cut off by the next hit. "Take that for the king, you foreign whore." The smack was smaller, but the young un's voice mimicked his parents' words. They did not stop even when I fell to the grimy water. My chest made a breaking sound as the woman's boot kicked it hard as any man's. There was little strength or will in me to fight back, and I let them have me. I could do no other. Then there was a shout, the sound of scuffling feet, followed by stillness. I was left to die in this place. I lay unmoving in the cold water, soaking into my clothes, and shivered violently. "Are you harmed? Can you stand?" Was I harmed? Of course I was harmed. The man, a rotund man of the law, grabbed my arm and laboured to lift me to my feet, and with less strength than a spider. I yelped loudly, and he released me. Then I screamed when I hit the ground. Whatever was broken in my chest pierced my innards in a cage of pain, so that only some of what happened around me after this slipped through the bars. The man of the law seemed not to know what to do. He left me lying in the blood-filled puddle while he took the names of the attackers who, it seemed, had the impertinence to still be nearby, and the names of witnesses that, I noted well, not only did not prevent my beating, but now came forward to vouch for the attackers. The officer of the peace swore my attackers, a family by the name of Atterbury, to abide by the law. Once one witness had vouched Mrs. Atterbury would appear in court the following day. They were free to leave. Free to leave. Theirs was the freedom to assault some hapless passer-by until damage beyond fixing. I could neither walk nor stand. It occurred to me I might die this night, my injuries being internal. Those bigots may have punched my insides into gruel, and I might die before I could see my dear Pierre once more. Years of midwifery had taught me it was not the wounds on the outside that killed a man, but those on the inside. Through a closing haze, before I blacked out, I heard the man of the law direct someone to fetch a cart. My heavy eyes closed until strong arms lifted me from the ground and placed me in the aforesaid cart. The agony of being moved was nothing to that by each tortuous bump the wheels encountered along the road. My chest yowled in protest, but all that came from me was an occasional groan. At some time the pain stopped. The next I knew, strong arms lifted me, oh so gently, from the cart and into the warm, familiar smell of my home. I knew they were Pierre's arms. Only he could provide such comfort through the pain that filled me then, and I knew it was home. Only home had such a superior effect of closing around one like a womb. It swaddled me as a newborn infant. My childhood showed that protection might be as superficial as external injuries, and that a marauder might, like internal bleeding, as easily enter your home to pillage and attack a family if there were no walls or doors. As if there were no walls or doors. A house was but false security. Yet though my family was regularly attacked by Puritans during the reign of the present king's father, home remained safer within than without. Perhaps it was the comforting crackle of the fire in the grate, or being cosseted by the love of my family, that gave me leave to relax the moment I was brought through the door. My husband fussed as I knew he would, and directed the men to carry me to our bedchamber, where I was laid down. My clothes, I might have said, if I could speak. They will drench the sheets. A surgeon has been sent for, came a gruff voice I did not know. I wanted to curl away from it, but could not move. The pain was only still when I was. Each part of me became solid as the winter Thames, as if blood refused to flow through it. I tried to tell Pierre what had happened, but my mouth, though uninjured, would not form even a mere whisper. "Is she dead?" Pierre asked, over and over. "She has heartbeat and breath," said the deep gruff voice, "but we lost her when we carried her into the cart, and she did not return." "When is the surgeon to come?" The warmth of a blanket covered me, but I could not thank Pierre for his kindness. My limbs were so cold. "A man was sent to fetch him but half an hour ago by the man of law that found her. The people who did this knew her name, so he will know where to come. He will come soon enough." "I offer you thanks, monsieur." I heard coins jangle, no doubt into the men's open palms. Then the voice faded as Pierre saw them to the door. "If you see the surgeon, tell him to make haste," he urged them as they left. If they answered, I did not hear them. The door latch clunked into place, and Pierre's footsteps returned to the bedside. A hand pushed the web of tangled hair from my face and stroked my cheek. Something warm moved over my cheek, as light as a feather, and I knew it was a tear trickling a trail to my ear. Did he cry because I was dead? I must surely be alive if my skin felt that exquisite touch. Then it was day. Familiar sunlight painted window squares on the wall, telling me it must be late morning. Cold night still touched my face and turned my breath into clouds. Pierre did not lie beside me, but slept upright in the chair next to the bed. Every laugh and frown line of Pierre's sleeping face was more familiar to me than my own. I cherished the curl of his surprising dark lashes, the deep-set greying hairline, the slant of his crumpled narrow lips, and how his aging skin hung loosely from his cheekbones onto his hand. This man had saved me over and over, and for him I would surely give my life, as I knew he would for me. That Pierre had watched over me was all the more endearing. I watched his stillness for some time, and the warmth that travelled through me had me try to reach out my hand to touch his face, but I could not move my hand. I could not move my arm, and I could not touch my husband's dear face. I tried to speak. I still could not. Nothing came but a croak. Though barely audible, the noise was enough to wake Pierre. His eyes came upon me the moment he opened them, as though he had never slept. When he saw I was awake, he sprung to his feet, took my hand in his, knelt by the bed, and thanked God for my deliverance. "Lizzie, Lizzie, ma chérie, you have returned to me." Not waiting for any reply from me, he told me I was lost for 2 nights and a day, and he had feared for my life more than he had ever feared for anything. The doctor had come and bandaged my chest tight, and all he could do was pray, he said, and pray he had. All he could do was hope, and hope held his hand as he had held mine. Memories of every time together had given him strength to pray such times would continue. On the 8th instant of April, almost 14 nights after I nearly died, I insisted on being carried in the coach to the Sessions of Peace to see Susanna and John Atterbury found guilty of their violence against me, only to be insulted by the paltry sum of 20 shillings they were fined for my grave injury and for my husband's despairing of my life. Their children, John, Sarah and Elizabeth, though they had intended me harm and attacked me, were out of breeches, but not considered old enough to be charged, so they were merely cautioned. I made sure to give them the evil eye throughout the hearing, though I had no doubt from their gestures and expressions they had no remorse for what they had done. As far as it concerned the judges, the Atterbury's attack on me was merely another chapter in the growing book of such sorts. That I took a foreign husband made it worse to some than being foreign myself. Foreigners were first to be hoisted and beaten, along with Catholics, for the cause of any calamity, whether plague or fire or other. Again, I say, I was doubly condemned, and the judges spared no sympathy. With the advance of the Catholic faith across the continent into Holland, many feared its poison would soon infect our kingdom through the war with the Dutch. The judges told me I could have suffered the fate of other unfortunate Catholics all over the city. I should be grateful, they said, I had not finished my life dangling from the nearest sign or at the end of a dark alley with a knife in my back. "'Tis 13 years since the plague," I said when I was allowed to speak. "Yet those of my religion are unforgiven, for so many carried away in death carts and thrown into common graves of every parish. 'Tis a dozen years since the great fire, yet we are still blamed for lazy bakers' folly. One nature's disease, the other an accident. I ask every one of you, when will truth be unveiled? When will blame for Spain's death, torture and inquisition fall where it belongs, in Spain?" My speech only served to act as bellows on embers, but now I knew the fear of persecution. Such persecutions of the Protestant minority by Catholics in Spain and other places were repeated here by Protestants against the Catholic minority. 'Twas the very same oppression and torment, with roles merely reversed. What difference the matter of sides, but the place the sides are taken.